Real Steel. This movie came out in 2011 when really good father and son movies had almost gone extinct in cinema. Anyone who knows good storytelling who watches this movie is going to recognize it as not so much a fighting robot story, but as a dad and son movie, which we desperately need more of, and more of this caliber. Real Steel is actually really good. It's the story of a past his glory days boxer who at some point started fighting with these robots that are sort of like giant Rock'em Sock'em robots, except, huge, ranging from like 50% larger than a good-sized man to twice as tall and many times the weight. Now, the history of these robots and what they were used for in this world before and or aside from robot boxing, or roboxing for a pun, never really touched on aside from reference to there having been generations of them, like there's generations of video games or any kind of technology. It said that the robot that Max forms an attachment to, whose name's Adam, is a very early G2, but we're never told what the current generation is. The boy named Max in the movie is played by Dakota Goyo, who I'm looking up has been acting since he started. Who has been acting since he started in commercials as an infant. He was born in 1999. He's really good, and he apparently has quite a history of being a really good child actor. And for the role he plays in this movie, he was awarded Best Performance in a Feature Film, Leading Young Actor. And he earned it. I don't know what kind of preparation Hugh Jackman, who plays the dad, Charlie, and Dakota Goyo did for these roles or for their individual scenes, but even considering the material they were working with, which is decent writing, but a very generic story and a type you've seen before, with the dad who is originally not too interested in spending time with his son, but the son eventually wins him over by finding something that they both have a passion for. That story's existed before, but Hugh Jackman and Dakota Goyo in this movie have one of, if not the most natural and believable father and son dynamics I've ever seen. It doesn't even look like they're acting, like at all. And also considering that the scenes where they're directly interacting together, not just in the same room, but directly conversing or having fun together and dancing with the robot, or the dad telling the boy, you should do this little dancing act with your robot as you're coming out into the arena. Every one of their bonding scenes, I buy that they are a dad and his kid, a dad and his son, every single time. That's amazing. I have never seen it so natural in a movie before. And I'm almost afraid to say much more, or I might give the whole movie away and you won't even have to go rent it or buy it. A couple of things I will add is this movie not only has a believable dynamic between a father and son who are just beginning to get to know each other, but it also shows the purpose in an adult's life that can be realized, can be brought out when they have children and suddenly have a reason to be a force for good in the world, to be a responsible adult. I do wish the script hadn't had Charlie start out as a deadbeat dad. I wish it had him trying to get in touch with his son again, because a lot of fathers that were not in their children's lives throughout the past decades, past the 1970s, weren't not present because they didn't want to be, which is far too often what's actually portrayed. A lot of them were in fact taken away from their children by force by the family courts. We really need to crack down on the family courts. A crackdown that should have started decades ago. And we need to drop this trope of the father who isn't interested in being in his kids' lives, because that's how Charlie starts out in this movie, and that is far less true than so many films and TV shows portray fathers. Now, this film makes amends for using that trope because the progression of the dad and son's bonding is so well acted and well written, and it is a blast to watch. This is a fun movie. And it does a good job of showing what a young boy is like at the age Max is, or the age range, the years which boys are like this. Well, I guess they're always like this to some extent. But it varies depending on the individual boy. The ages between 8 and 12 are very much like how Dakota Goyo portrays Max, which is not surprising because the kid was that age when they filmed the movie. He's an adult now, and he did an amazing job acting, as I've already mentioned. If you haven't interacted with boys of that age, and it would have to be outside of a school setting, because unfortunately what schools have become is extremely boring, emotionally abusive, energy and soul-draining prisons. And no, that was not an exaggeration. That is exactly what they are for boys. And it does not, at least anymore, give them any preparation for an adult life. I'm not kidding. Any. Boys, as they naturally are, and I know because I was one not long ago, are adventurous. They want to challenge their parents. They want to look adults in the eye and play and talk on their level, even if they realistically can't yet. Sort of like how really little kids want to play with their older siblings or older kids on the playground, even though they can't really keep up with them yet. Boys want to challenge adults. There are ways in which they can to some extent. You know, this actually makes me think of... People thought that Jake Lloyd, as the 9-year-old Anakin Skywalker in The Phantom Menace, was ridiculous, saying yippee. But come on, first of all, that was a product of poor plotting and sloppy writing, and maybe he wasn't the optimal actor for the role. He gets to pilot a tiny racing pod hooked to twin jet engines through deadly labyrinthine caverns, a blazing hot sand, rock, desert course, and creatures, most of who want to smear him against the canyon wall. What 9-year-old boy would not say yippee to that challenge? If you say none, you don't know boys. I know that's not exactly what he said yippee to in the film, but again, if the movie had been written intelligently, when he was allowed to race in the boot to Eve, that is when he would have said yippee. There is an amusingly, yet in some ways enviable, brazenness to young boys. And I like that in this movie, Max is, well, first of all, like that, but also doesn't entirely steal the show. His dad rediscovering the heart and passion he once had is essential to the story as well. It's the dad, Charlie, played by Hugh Jackman, who has to fight the final challenge at the film's climax, which I thought was an awesome climax, and a good way to conclude the movie. Hugh fights through controlling the robot, of course. You know what? If you haven't seen this movie, go watch it. Go rent it, go buy it. I think it's even worth buying. And if you're a dad who has a son or sons, watch this movie with your boys. It is an amazing father-son bonding movie.